everyone, my name is Sonia and you are listening to the I'll Be Nearly There Yet podcast. You are so welcome to come and join us in this journey. Each week I love having a conversation with someone different about their journey in parenting and family life. I'm a mum to 4 children and I'm the families lead at Kerith Community Church, and at the moment at Kerith we're in a Wellbeing series looking at God's plan for our well-being. So this week it was really timely that I sat down with Jade Ross. Jade is part of our Bracknell site at Kerith, and she's also a drama therapist with over 10 years experience working in adult, adolescent and child mental health. She's got a particular interest in trauma work and wellbeing maintenance strategies. So what a perfect fit for a conversation this week. You may be tempted to think you've got to sit and make loads of notes when she starts sharing all the great wisdom and resources that are available, but Jade has actually been really kind and produced a resource sheet for us. We'll give you a bit of information about where you can find that at the end, but for now, we really hope you enjoy listening in to our conversation. Hey, so this week I'm joined by Jade Ross. Jade, you're so welcome on the podcast. It's great to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be with you all.
Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself? And while you're telling us about yourself, like, who is family to you, Jade?
Yeah, so that's such a great question. So I'm married to Mickey. He's my husband. We've been together for about 6 years. We've been married for almost 4 years. Our kind of family unit of siblings and parents live close by. We've got a niece and a nephew. I am a godparent. I have godchildren. And also I've got a core group of amazing girlfriends who let me in on their lives and their families and their kids' lives. And I'm really privileged to walk life with them. So for me, family is rich and diverse, sometimes complicated, and yeah, just really, really important.
Oh, that's so good. How long have you been married, you guys?
We've been married almost 4 years.
Almost 4 years. Oh.
Yeah.
And tell us a little about what you do for work outside of the home.
Yeah, so by training, I'm a drama and movement therapist. So that kind of uses the creative arts and anything you'd see in a theatre and movement to help people process their emotions, share their experiences and stories, and find out a bit more about who they are. I've also got some training as a cognitive behavioural therapist and some trauma-focused training. So really, I'm a therapist who, I guess my specialism really is trauma and supporting children, young people and adults who have been through traumatic experiences. And I also work a lot with kind of managing anxiety and developing kind of well-being strategies to keep us healthy throughout whatever life might throw at us. Yeah.
That sounds amazing. And it's so timely that we're having this conversation, because as a church, we're in the middle of wellness series on God's plan for our well-being. It's also the week that this is being released, depending on when people listen to it, is also Child Mental Health Awareness Week. So yeah, people like yourself and the professions you work in are so important. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what a day looks like in your role?
Yeah, so one of the things I love about my job, it's really varied, and that's one of the special things about it. About 85% of my work at the moment is with schools, and kind of the rest is private practice work, or I work for a charity that works with the armed forces. So there's a kind of range of organisations that I work with throughout the week. At the moment, I'm a nominated key worker, so about a day and a half, 2 days a week, I'm in school, still doing kind of face-to-face work with children and teachers, and the rest of my work at the moment, like lots of other people, is remotely using the phone, post and Zoom, depending on what is best for the clients. And my day might look like 3 or 4 or 5 one-to-one sessions. At the moment, I do group as well, but not right now in the pandemic. And those sessions are all using creativity. So I might be in one session using Lego and superheroes, and in the next session using fairies, and in the next session doing cooking or photography or poetry or story with children and young people, depending on what their interest is, to help them explore their emotions and their feelings and the situation. I might also do a couple of sessions with staff members that that are teachers or teaching support workers, around therapy if they need that, but also just as a sounding board to what support might be useful in school. I work a bit on curriculum design and training as well. So my day is quite varied, which I love, and it depends which organisation I'm with, but that's kind of a general overview of the kind of things I might do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's really interesting. What got you into this line of work? What like drives you? What's your driving force behind it?
I've always loved people and journeying with people, and I love the creative arts. And I think my own experience as a young person was that the creative arts could be really powerful for helping me process my emotions, manage my emotions, and tell my story. Those were two really key drivers. And then as I explored training and went on kind of my journey into kind of adulthood, I kind of discovered this, and yeah, it just felt like a real God thing, really. It kind of felt like it was a great fit for me.
You mentioned, yeah, it was a good thing. You're Christian, aren't you? You've been part of Kerith for how long?
Yeah, so Mickey and I have been coming to Kerith for, I think, about 2.5 years, maybe 3. We kind of started kind of just dipping our toes in with you guys, and then kind of made it our home. I was raised in a Christian family, and yeah, really kind of found Jesus in my kind of teenage life in terms of my own walk with Jesus, but I had the real privilege of being raised in a Christian home, and God has always been a real anchor and cornerstone in my life, and I guess underpins all that I do and who I am, really.
Yeah, and I love that God's using people that love him, know him, believe in him out in the secular world to help people with their well-being, to help them with emotional and mental health. It's so key, it's so important, and we're so glad that you're a part of Kerith Bracknell, isn't it, but part of the wider Kerith Church community. You mentioned about like your job's changed a bit over the last few months because of the pandemic. In working with children and young people over the last few months, I wonder if there's things you've noticed, like common themes you've noticed that have come up or have been on the increase that maybe weren't before. If you want to share a little bit about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are a few things that are coming up more. I think generally children are struggling to regulate their emotions more, which is really understandable. And they're missing friends and family. There's kind of that theme of disconnection coming up, which I think is the same for all of us. And that kind of sense of fear of the unknown and living in the unknown is definitely really present at the moment. There's quite a lot of anxiety and fear and sadness around, which I think is the same for all of us. And so I think the things that the adults are feeling are very much there for the children and young people as well. There have also been 2 other themes which I really want to celebrate, actually, and that's children's resilience and creativity. Like, they've been so resilient, and often I think more resilient than the adults, actually.
Yeah,
you know, we often plan so much in case, you know, something that's going to change or be different might be really anxiety making for them, and actually they just take it in their stride, and they're so resilient. And I think it's so important to remember that when there's so much change and a lot of fear around how this is impacting the long term our children and young people, it can be really easy to forget their resilience. And actually I've seen that resilience in amazing ways. And the same with their creativity. Oh my goodness, they've been so creative. You know, face masks become characters, and you know, you talk to a child about what they want to play on the telephone and they say, I want to play it, or I want to do fairy dancing, and I'm sat there going, how the heck do I play it with you on the phone? And they find a way. You know, they're so creative, and I think it's been really amazing and inspiring to see those themes coming through, as well as the kind of the other themes that have been coming up that are maybe a bit trickier for us all, really.
Yeah, and it's so important to remember those. There are positives in this. You know, for our family, having more time together, more quality time together has been such a gift. Now, I know not all children and young people have the same kind of family experience as mine do, but yeah, there are positives, and that theme of resilience is definitely something. I saw someone say the other day, you know, we're actually going to see a generation of children with higher levels of resilience than anyone has gone before them because of what's happened and what could come out of that. So yeah, I love that you've picked up on those things. So Jade, we knew that you were coming to talk to us, so I put a bit of a shout out to Kerith parents to see if there are any kind of common themes or questions that they might like to have. I was like, ask the expert time. So you're the expert, obviously, in this conversation. No pressure. And yeah, one of the first questions was, what are some of the signs, maybe more subtle signs as well as obvious ones, to look for that would tell me that my child isn't doing so well? Now, there's obvious things we can all think of, but maybe some of the more subtle ones as well.
So one of the things I'd say is that everybody is different and everyone has unique cues, just like you and the other adults in your life have unique cues. And the more you get to know each other, the more you might spot those. It's similar with your children. It's kind of about going on a journey to discover what their cues are and what their triggers are. And that can take time, and there can be mistakes along the way, and that's totally okay. The love languages, information and quizzes can be really great. They've got love language quizzes now for children of most ages, really, and they can be really useful information for kind of figuring out what really makes your child feel loved, because then, you know, on days where you think they're maybe struggling a little bit, you can kind of reflect and go, actually, my child hasn't had any quality time with me today, and that's really important for them. Or, oh, I'm aware today there's not going to be much physical touch, I just need to check they're going to be okay. So the love languages can be quite a helpful tool for kind of helping you to understand how your child functions and what might be helpful for them and what might cause them to struggle a little bit more. It can also be really helpful to kind of make connections between the physical flags and emotions. So like tummy aches, headaches, not wanting to eat lots, hyperactivity, as well as kind of lethargy and hypoactivity, can all be kind of signals and flags that our bodies are giving us that we're not okay, or that we need something emotionally. And actually having conversations and making children aware of those connections can be really useful for finding their triggers. So as part of that, you can verbalize and model your own cues and emotions. So, you know, you might be sat doing maths homework and suddenly you start feeling a bit lightheaded and hungry, and you think, actually in 2 minutes time I'm going to have no concentration, I'm going to be snapping at somebody. Well, at that point, to kind of say, oh, I'm feeling a bit lightheaded and hungry, I think I'm going to need a pause and go and grab a snack. Do you want to carry on, or do you need a snack too? What's your body telling you? That kind of modelling in the moment can be really good learning for you and your children about what those subtle cues are for what's going on with them. And I guess just kind of one of the other practical thing that you can maybe do is kind of reflecting back exercises. So, you know, if something has kind of been a real challenge, or a child has become unregulated, kind of hours after the event, you can kind of use drawings, comic strips, or play to kind of act out the situation, focusing on the lead up to that, and kind of see what you discover. You know, like, oh, how did baby bear feel in his body just before he roared? You know, what did baby bear think when the evil crow said that? And you can kind of unpick with the children, in whatever way works for them, what happened in the lead up to dysregulation. And sometimes that can help you kind of unpick a little bit of what's going on for your child.
Use that word, unregulated. Just explain that to anyone who maybe doesn't know.
Yeah, so the term regulation, I guess, really is about being in a place of calm and settledness and feeling good and steady and secure. So dysregulation is when a child might be feeling really stressed or really angry, or is getting overwhelmed by a particular emotion.
And I love that, what you said about the baby bear. What about older children? Like anything for older children, or even like into teenagers? Do you work with teenagers as well?
Yes, I do. So I'm a CAMHS registered therapist, and I do work with teenagers. So yeah, so I think the same would be said in terms of understanding they have unique cues, using the love language tools with them. There's a teenage one specifically for teenagers, and modelling actually what your flags are, and kind of talking to them about what their flags might be, and knowing that your flags and their flags might be different, and actually that's okay. And then the reflect back, exercise you can do in whatever way works for them. So it might be talking about it, but they might really not want to talk about it, and it might be through comic strips or drawing, or just kind of naming with them what you're seeing and what you're experiencing and being curious about it. We kind of, it can be really helpful to come from a place of curiosity when you're trying to figure out what the subtle cues are and what are going on, because it's a constant journey of development and understanding.
And they change as they get older and develop, don't they? Like I've got a 13-year-old, an 11-year-old. The 11-year-old is the girl, and the other 3 are boys. So 13-year-old boy, 11-year-old girl, and twin boys they'll be 8 in April. So the 13-year-old is like fully into teen stuff, and the 11-year-old, being female, she's maybe a bit more mature earlier than maybe he was at 11. Maybe that's a sweeping generalization, but that's been our experience. So she's more like into the teenagey type behaviors that you might see, and maybe wanting to withdraw a bit, have more time on their own. And it's kind of, for us, we're kind of like learning the change now between when they're children and when they're teenagers, and their needs change. And there are some common things, just like wanting a bit more independence and wanting to be on their own a bit more. And it's easy to think, oh, are they okay? Is there something wrong? Is this trying to tell us something? Or actually, is it just normal, like life transition for getting older and getting more independence?
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of teenage time really is that, they're sitting in that place of transition where they want to be grown-ups, but they also still want to be children, and they're kind of really wrestling with that. So some of the behaviors you see will be, them pushing more to independence, and then suddenly wanting to be cuddled and rocked by you, and that's completely normal. And I think teenagehood is about exploring and discovering who they are and who they want to be, and with their emotions, kind of, there are hormones going all over the place, and actually it's about just kind of journeying with them on that and being aware it is a time of transition.
I love, we've gone a bit beyond now, but I love the example you gave earlier about feeling lightheaded and hungry, and talking about that, because that's a common thing. Like young children especially, they switch, don't they, from like being absolutely fine to being the word we call hangry in our house. When you're hungry and you just turn into a monster, whereas actually just have a snack and they're just fine again. It's like, the common thing. I'm glad to hear it's not just in my house.
Definitely.
So another question from a parent: my preschooler seems to find it really difficult to regulate their emotions. How can I help them?
Good question.
You might have touched on a little bit of that already, but
so I guess there are a few contextual things I would want to say, and then a couple of kind of practical things. One of the things I'd want to say is all emotions are okay. Toddlers are supposed to struggle to manage their emotions. Toddlers have meltdowns, kids get anxious, teenagers are grumpy. It's all part of the journey of discovering emotional well-being, learning to survive emotions, learning that you can be overwhelmed and then be okay, and learning how not to become overwhelmed by emotions. It's all part of the journey. So it's okay if your toddler is struggling to manage their emotions. That's really normal. And I guess I'd encourage you to not be afraid of your children's emotions. And I know that's really easy to say, but actually, when you're in the middle of a supermarket and your child is screaming blue murder, or you're trying to put your children in the car and they're yelling, I hate you, you're not my parent, get off me. It can come, and it can be quite frightening how strong our children's emotions are. But actually, if in those moments you can acknowledge that fear and then find your brave, it can be really helpful, because actually when children are kind of full of emotion, it can be an amazing time for connecting with them and teaching with them. And when we're frightened, often we can want to push away that emotion or suppress that emotion or get rid of that emotion as quickly as possible. And actually that means we potentially miss out on times to connect with them and teach them. So I'd really encourage you to think about, what is scary about your children's level of emotion or intensity of emotion, or not managing to regulate their emotions. you know, what scares you, and why, and just kind of reflecting on that and being aware of that, so that you don't miss opportunities for connection and teaching. And there are a couple of facts that parents I've worked with have found quite useful. That is that after a child has become unregulated, so if they've had a big, really strong moment of emotion or a tantrum or whatever's happened for them, it can actually, research shows it takes about 40 minutes for the hormones to completely settle again and calm down, which is a lot longer than I think lots of us would expect. So actually, you know, just being aware of that and knowing that actually, you know, for the 40 minutes after something has happened, the hormones are still coming down, and it's going to take some time, and just being aware of that can be helpful. And the research also shows that until kind of our early 20s, we're not able to fully regulate without support. So again, it is really a long journey.
Early 20s, that's amazing.
Yeah, and so it is really a long journey. And again, it can just be helpful to remember that from an encouraging place, in terms of if you're at a tricky season, again, it's part of the journey and it is normal. Dan Siegel has done some amazing writing on regulating emotions. He writes about the neuroscience and what's going on in children's brains, and his work is really accessible and really practical. So he kind of gives you the science and the research and then gives you tools to respond to that. So if you have capacity and time, I'd really recommend you kind of dip into Dan Siegel's work. I'd also really encourage you to think about how you are regulating your emotions, because actually children learn through us and through what they see and what they pick up on. And also, if, you know, a child is angry or frustrated, they might trigger that in you too. And so being aware of that and knowing how to self-regulate yourself actually can mean you manage the situations more effectively. And the more regulated you are, the likelihood is the more they will come down and kind of get calm again. On really practical tools that you might want to try implementing, the Gottman Institute have designed something called emotional coaching. It's a 5-step process of how to kind of talk to children of all ages. You can start when your children are like 2, and it works all the way up to kind of through the teenage years. And it's just a 5-step process of engaging with children and talking to children about their emotions and what is happening for them. And it's a really lovely, practical, easy way to learn how to engage empathetically with what's happening for your children, and to talk to them about that and problem solve with them around that. You might also want to use colours or mood monsters to kind of help begin a dialogue and conversation and language with your children around when they're struggling, you know, so figuring out what they feel and how they are when they're green and what they need, you know, when they're turning to amber or orange, what are they feeling, what are they thinking, what do they need, and when it's red in those moments, what are they feeling, what are they thinking, what do they need, because then you literally can just work on a colour. Mum, I've gone into the orange, you know, Dad, I'm at red. And that can be a really useful language to, again, develop quite early on with your children. And the mood monster kind of information can be a good kind of pictorial way of introducing that to your children. Any activities or strategies that you do use, I'd encourage you to introduce them when your children are calm and settled.
Not mid-meltdown.
No mid-meltdown.
Let's look at this little thing that Mummy's been reading all about.
Exactly. Mid-meltdown generally is not going to work.
No.
So if there's anything that you like the sound of, or you kind of want to pick up on, have a look at them when you're feeling calm and have brain capacity, and introduce them to your children when everybody is calm. So that's more likely to be helpful.
Wow, so much wisdom in there. Now I know, Jade, you are going to put together, apologies for if anyone's been furiously writing notes, but you're going to put together for us like a resource sheet, aren't you, with everything that you're mentioning, which is be such a gift to us. So thank you so much for doing that. I want to pick up on what you said about us self-regulating, like ourselves as the adult in the relationship. Now, you know, you have children and you've got like this mirror in front of you into your innermost you know, the workings of your brain and heart and everything. And you know, we love our children, but sometimes they press our buttons, you know. And great tips there for self-regulating and helping children self-regulate and helping them. Anywhere you could direct us as the adults, if we're struggling with that, maybe we didn't have that as children ourselves. Maybe we learned differently, you know, our experience was different, or maybe we just got stuff going on that means we're struggling at the moment. Like, what would your kind of top tips be? I haven't prepped you with this one, but like for the adults, for the parents.
Yeah, totally. No, I think it's a great question, because the reality is, actually, I think kids know how to push our buttons better than anyone else, don't they? And I think it's really true. And sometimes seeing that mirror can be helpful because you know how to connect with them, but actually sometimes it can be really unhelpful. I think, you know, being self-aware about that and having a safe group of people that you can be really honest and authentic with is important, and to kind of own it, and to know that, you know, it's okay to make mistakes. And actually the research shows that the repairing moment with children can be even more important than the moment of disconnection. So kind of remembering that actually, if you do get something wrong, it's okay. Just try and work on how you reconnect with your children afterwards. I think it's really great that we're doing a wellbeing series in Kerith. I think, you know, the book that we're doing really gives you a really good basis for kind of learning how to regulate your emotions. The NHS 5 Steps for Wellbeing, which we might chat a bit about later on as well, has some really good tips and techniques for what we need for our wellbeing and how we maybe can kind of connect into those and make time for those. And there are lots of great resources out there, but I think start by becoming self-aware. You know, what are your triggers? How do you feel when something happens? And also know it's okay to step away. Like, I think often parents, you know, get caught in kind of discussions or fights or kind of get drawn into things, and actually that sends our stress levels high. And it is okay to step away and step out and take a breath. And you know, breathing is a really key thing. Like, when we become stressed, our brains change. So different parts of our brains switch on when we become stressed. And often what happens is we go into stress, parts of our brain switch on, and that means that our whole system kind of goes into kind of preparing for survival, really. And as part of that, oxygen moves from the prefrontal cortex, which is kind of the logic part of the brain, to other areas of the brain and the body to get us ready to kind of act in a stressful situation. And that can mean that we stop thinking straight. So actually, if you can get oxygen back into you by doing breathing techniques and by getting some fresh air, that can bring your kind of thinking rational brain back online. And when our thinking rational brains are online, it's much easier to manage a meltdown. So I'd really encourage parents to kind of find some breathing techniques and kind of remember to breathe in situations, because it really will help.
And it's so good because yes, they can press our buttons, but they're not like, they're the children. They're not intentionally trying to wind us, they're struggling with whatever they are, and we do need to help ourselves and be in the best place so we can help them, because ultimately we're the adult in the relationship. And I love what you said about like modeling the reconciliation afterwards. For me, that models to our children forgiveness, but so much more than that, it models how God loves us and forgives us. It models that grace as well. It's part of their discipleship journey for us to be able to say, I'm sorry, I got stressed, or I raised my voice, or, you know, just that opportunity to model that with our children and say we're not perfect, you know, is, I think, really powerful. Yeah, that's so good. So the last question from a parent I wanted to ask you was, how can we support children back to normality post-COVID without it being overwhelming? Now, this question came from a parent of preschoolers, but I wonder if you could answer it with some ideas for children of all different ages, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually think the lockdown process is probably going to help with this. We're not suddenly going to just go back to normal. I think, as we've seen, things are going to be introduced gradually. And actually that means you can deal with things step by step and take it bit by bit. So I think the process itself might help in terms of not getting too overwhelmed. I think, own the overwhelm when it comes, and kind of accept it and deal with it if it does come. Schools are really focusing on something called the recovery curriculum. It actually became a requirement of the curriculum, and that is about kind of interweaving throughout the whole curriculum activities and learning designed to help children successfully transition. And I think that's going to continue, and it's designed on the basis that some children might need a couple of weeks, but other children might need it for kind of a year or longer. So I'd encourage you to engage with your children's school on that and talk to them about their recovery curriculum, what they're doing, and to kind of engage with them on the recovery curriculum. And I'd also say, speak with positivity and dream together, and allow hope to come in when thinking about the future. It might be that you want to identify positives. You mentioned positives that have come from it, and actually you might want to think about how you're going to keep those in there. You might want to do a picture together, or a scrapbook, or a jar, which are kind of your learnings and the things that you want to keep as a family, and then create a bit of a family manifesto, to kind of, and give everybody space and a voice in that, and kind of negotiate that to kind of make sure that we hold on to, slower pace, or managing our diaries, or gratitude, or quality time, or some of those things that actually have been positive.
Oh, thank you, Jade. We're coming near the end of our conversation. I'm going to ask you the last question in a moment that I ask everyone, but if there's anything else on well-being you wanted to share, then now's your chance. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
So I think one of the other questions that we haven't looked at, but that was sent through, was how to fill your child's buckets with kind of techniques for well-being.
I missed that one out. I'm so sorry.
No worries.
So sorry to that parent. Let me read it. Yeah, I want to be able to be proactive in my child's emotional well-being and not just waiting until they have a meltdown. What things can I do to fill their bucket and help their emotional communication skills? Good catch there, Jade. Well done.
Well, it was just a great question.
It's really great. We don't want to lose it.
I thought I'd slip it in there if it was now or never.
Definitely.
And I guess just thinking about that, there are possibly some umbrella ideas that it might be helpful for parents to think about, and then some really specific areas that they might want to dig down into. The 5 steps to wellbeing, the NHS 5 steps to wellbeing: connect with others, physical activity, learn a new skill, giving, and mindfulness, is a great umbrella. And actually, I think they're all such godly things, and things that you can invite God into and pray into. And that kind of structure you might want to kind of get to know and think about in terms of developing your wellbeing week, and kind of figuring out what's strong and what you get lots of, and what you might need a bit more of in your week with your family. And also, the Action for Happiness do themed monthly wellbeing calendars, which could give you some structure if you want kind of a family wellbeing structure. I think February's on friendship, and there's something to do each day around that. So those are kind of a couple of umbrella things that you could think about introducing or getting to know as kind of anchors throughout kind of developing wellbeing with your children. And then I think there are some really kind of key things to think about. Maybe storybooks are a great way to introduce wellbeing concepts to children. Storybooks like The Colour Monster, A Niffle New Called Nevermind, The Huge Bag of Worries, How Are You Feeling Today, All About Your Feelings, are great storybooks for kind of introducing themes of wellbeing to children. You Are Special is a lovely Christian book around identity and managing emotions. And Ollie and His Superpowers is a great book for slightly older children. And stories are great because they introduce themes, but also they can be a great springboard for discussion. So you might want to find some storybooks that your kids will like. Lots of them are on YouTube if you want to watch them before you buy them. And introducing just like 5 or 10 minutes a day of kind of well-being time. It might be a kind of mellow moment, or it might be a power blast moment where you're kind of running off energy or trying to calm down. It doesn't need to be a lot. Research shows 5 or 10 minutes is enough. And there are some really great apps and resources that you can use to help you do that. Go Noodle, Stretches, the Peace Out series on YouTube, Headspace for Kids, Smiling Mind, Mindful Monster Cards, can all kind of help you with that. And breathing techniques, like we were saying for grown-ups, it's great if our children can learn how to do those too. And there are lots of great breathing techniques out there that you can teach and use with your children. So getting into a routine of having a little bit of well-being time within your day for everyone in the family can be really useful, and mean everyone is kind of upskilled, so that when something is going tricky, you can kind of go back to that and extend your well-being time or use some of those tools with them. There's also mindfulness games like Dobble, Pick Up Sticks, I Spy, Can You Find Me, which are great ways to kind of teach children to focus and stay present, and kind of manage their emotions. And journaling and being reflective can be a great skill to kind of teach your children. The Happy Self Journal is an amazing resource for primary school and senior school children, if children like doing kind of structured journaling, but also just doing emoji check-ins and kind of being reflective with your kids about how they are can really upskill them and help them. So there are lots of ways you can kind of interweave well-being in manageable chunks kind of into your lives, to upskill your children. And I think probably one of the greatest things about that is just teaching your children to be comfortable with vulnerability. It's probably one of the greatest gifts we can give our children, and Brené Brown has some amazing resources for families on how to do that. And I just say it's an adventure. Like, everybody, you know, engages differently with different techniques and activities, and it's about kind of saying to your kids, let's go on a well-being adventure together. Let's find what works for you, let's find what works for me, let's just try it all out, give it a go, and see what we really like.
I'm so glad that you picked up on the fact that I'd forgotten to ask that question, because there was so much wealth in there. Thank you so much. As a Christian, how do you marry the two, the secular and the sacred? Yeah, explain that in case anyone is listening and thinking, well, why do we need to do all this stuff when we can just, you know, read God's word, pray, and those two things obviously really important things to do. Absolutely. Why do we need all this extra stuff as well? Like,
so I would say all these things are tools to helping us to connect more deeply with who God made us to be and how he wants us to function. Like, God designed emotions, God loves emotions, and God designed us to live, you know, as people of peace and security and wholeness. And actually there are so many things in the world that can try and rob us of those things. And all the things we've chatted about today really are kind of windows that open up our connection to God and our connection to who he made us to be at our absolute best. And actually all the tools and techniques we've talked about today, you know, God can be such a part of. You know, when I was on my journey of well-being, which has been long and rich, you know, one of the books around meditation that I discovered was Into the Silence, and it was all about Christian meditation and silence and meeting God in that place, and it transformed the way I thought about meditation and mindfulness. And so I think for me, you know, God wants to be with us in it all, and it's about how we let him in. And also prayer, like, you know, prayer is so huge, and actually if we can teach our children to pray about their emotions and to ask God about their emotions and to say, you know, Father God, what do you think of me right now, because this is how I'm feeling and I'm not sure if that is the truth, you know, and Jesus, where are you in this situation, you know? We have the privilege of being able to be in constant conversation with God and to pray about our emotions and to pray about our triggers. So, you know, as we've talked today, actually, if there are things that have come up for you, I'd really encourage you to kind of open them up in prayer and worship with Jesus.
Amen. Thank you so much, Jade. Oh, that's awesome. You mentioned about the journey of your own well-being. Well, this podcast is called Are We Nearly There Yet? Because children often ask that question on a long journey when you've just left the end of your road. And we usually ask it in relation to a parenting journey. But today I want to ask you, from your journey, with your own wellbeing journey, knowing what you know now as a trained therapist, what essential items would you take with you now on your journey wellbeing if you were to start out at the beginning, knowing now what you didn't know then?
That's such a great question, and I've been reflecting on that, and I think there are 4 things that really came to mind for me. And for me, I love the phrase, self-care gives the world the best of me, not what's left of me. And actually, I think, particularly for women, there can be a lot of guilt and judgment around self-care and taking time for yourself and doing what you need to do. And actually, when I realised that actually looking after myself and my own well-being meant that everybody else got the best of me, it transformed my opinion of well-being and self-care, and it transformed the way I prioritised my self-care. And it was no longer something selfish or something to be just snipped at and snapped at, but actually it was a core thing that enabled me to be the best that I could be for everybody else. And I think also the power of mindfulness, like I am one of the least mindful people. My head is all over the place all the time. And actually, I've really learned through the book I was telling you about, and also some of Amisha Jade's TED Talks around the power of mindfulness in helping us be effective in stress, to really learn how to be really present in the moment, and to not be drawn away by anxiety or thoughts of the future or thoughts of the past, and to just be really present. And for me, that has kind of really enabled me to find so much more peace and calm and kind of authenticity. So I would really encourage you, even if you aren't a mindful person, it can be done. And it's really transformed the way that I function. So I think those are kind of 2 kind of big things. And then I think 2 little things that have also been key is turning my shoulds into coulds. I think we often live under shoulds, and it can actually be a real prison of pressure and a real energy drain. And actually turning my shoulds into coulds, well, I could do that, but I also could do this, has really helped me in terms of the choices I make and the boundaries I put in place, and kind of living from a place of joy and energy has been really helpful. And then my last thing is saying no for the bigger yes. I'm definitely a bit of a people pleaser and have a bit of a fear of missing out, and actually really knowing what my big yeses are means that when I'm saying no to something, I'm saying yes to something bigger. And that for me has been really helpful in terms of how I decide how I manage my energy and how I prioritize things.
This has been so rich. I want everyone to listen to this, whether they're a parent of, teacher, whether they don't know any children ever. I think what you've said has been so helpful. We can apply us to our lives. And I'm just so grateful that you came to talk to us, Jade. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much. It's been such a privilege to get to spend some time chatting to you and to everybody who's listening. So thank you so much for having me.
No problem. Thank you. We'll have you on again one day, I'm sure.
I'd love to come back.
Well, I have to say, I don't really know where to start when it comes to summarising that conversation, because there was just such a rich wealth of wisdom and knowledge there, wasn't there, that Jade shared with us. As we mentioned during the conversation, Jade has actually done a resource sheet for us. She's prepared that for us. She knows what it's like for us as busy parents. We can't possibly retain everything that she just said. So in line with the different questions that I asked her that some of you submitted, we've got little bullet points underneath and little links to the different resources, the different things that she mentioned in that conversation. We'll post that in our Kerith Kids Club group on our Facebook page, attached to the Kerith Community Church Facebook page. So please do go and check that out. If you're not already a part of that group, go and have a look, because that's where we'll be posting the resource sheet. We really hope that you've enjoyed that conversation. Know that we're praying for your family's well-being. We're praying for your well-being as you lead your family as parents. And we just hope that you have a great week together. Join us next time on Are We Nearly There Yet?